And today's extra topic is going to be listening. And not in the patronizing sense, I wouldn't hope of that at least, but listening in the quality of being able to actually be in an earnest light observant of things and even seeing where listening can still fail. Now, personally, people as much as people will say things like, "Oh, you can never do too much research, you can never do too much listening," I dare say I'd be the devil's advocate for those things because I've done too much research on my own, likewise, but I've even done too much listening, and where listening becomes a failure is when you don't do nothing, when you don't act on the things that you've already observed, and still being observant. Yet even then, being observant and listening in a way that is earnest and promising doesn't have to be a curse. You can still make sure that things that you listen to are things that you can actually absorb, not in the shallow sense, but like absorb so that you know that you can retain something that actually matters to you, or even if it doesn't matter to you, it can still be important. But by listening to something that you don't have to do something about, that could be its own insight. I admit that, but being able to know when an actionable thing could be good. And I know I said things before like choose not to act as action itself. Those insightful terms before, but when you can listen to something that you can act on, that's still good. I hope I didn't make that sound too blunt, but you know, when listening has become a skill of mine that I personally did have to harness and not have to push too hard on at the same time, where I started off being someone who may have not listened too well at the beginning, maybe even listened too much otherwise, and didn't bounce it to the things. So I had polar extremes at that point, maybe being polar opposites. That's how that works. But polar extremes of not listening or listening too much, and not knowing how to bounce between that kind of thing. So I did push a little too hard listening at first because I was trying to listen more over time, and then I didn't know what to do with it once I was doing too much. Whenever I listened to too much, maybe by terms of what people make, so I find this annoying because if this is controversial for you, I'm sorry, but like what I find annoying in terms of what other people find threatening about me when I listen to in too much, I maybe eavesdropping or being too alert about things that are overcomplicating things, and you know. But I hope by listening, I still find a middle ground that was still worthwhile. Usually, you don't go wrong with listening, even if you're still just trying to make sure that you don't act on the wrong things, and that can be controversial. I don't even mean to say it like that, but either of those things. But listening skills are very hard to sharpen. Like you have to make sure that you're not just paying attention to what you can understand, or what you can find, but by actually trying to understand, interpret it in your own means. It doesn't have to be your own stock communication. I still think to this day communication is not always about clear conciseness. I still think that's been over implied by a lot of people, and I think that's not right to do that. I think of it, that's my own value of that, is if even a core value, which is that I think misunderstanding is a huge thing, but even higher than misunderstanding is over implication, where if you're gonna say something like, oh well, everyone's going to think that listening will only work if your communication is clear and concise. Well, not really. So if clear and concise is always the way of communication, then why would you have to be a good listener? And my instead of that is that good listening will allow you to make sure that you can still observe what you understand, even if it's understood in a different way. And it's okay to understand it in a different way as long as you could maybe communicate it better and not have to always be clear and concise, because that's my perspective of that. But by actually listening, you're not just approving of the blunt and prejudices of how people may observe you for not thinking that you're not listening. But by being a good listener, you do make it easier for people to understand you by how it will subconsciously interact with your own behaviors, and by how it will actually allow you to be someone who does understand things, even if they didn't have to do it consciously, all the same. When you can be a good listener, you usually understand things that you don't even think about when you actually are paying attention anyways. And when you're a good listener, you do tend to be someone who understands more than they can even consciously do, if that also makes sense. So that is my take on just listening. Yes, sir. See you in the next video if I don't abuse this too much, but I'll keep going otherwise. Bye.